Service today. How about we let the Sunday school go out? Thank you, Sammy. And yes, so I'll be giving the service today. And I usually don't share my title because I like to keep it a surprise. But I think today I'll share it because it's Rain versus Evil. And I can tell I'm a little bitter because I'm really disappointed we didn't have the outdoor service because we had like 3 days of really, really beautiful weather. And then yeah, I was very sad this morning when we woke up. It was just really rainy and windy and not really suitable for an outdoor picnic and kind of an outdoor community event. So but we know that's life in Ireland, right? And so we just have to be flexible. So we have our backup outdoor service in 2 weeks. So hopefully the Irish weather gods shine on us. We'll see what happens. But part of it was I was being a little lazy. I was going to give a really short service because I was expecting it to be a beautiful day. And I was like, something along the lines of, let God's nature give the service today, da da da, right? So maybe it was my fault. God was sending a very clear message of don't be lazy for a Sunday service. But joking aside, obviously I don't believe God's changing the weather based on me. So, I'm not that arrogant, or at least I wouldn't say that out loud. But but uh but yeah, if I was gonna say let the weather speak for itself or God's creation speak for itself, it does kind of bring up the interesting question of, well, what is the rain saying then, right? What's God's nature saying when it's raining, right? Am I being a hypocrite, right? I only like God's nature when I personally benefit from it, right? Or is there um but I think it's very natural for people to not want to be out in the rain, right? Like there's a kind of comfort level that people have, and that's also part of nature. It's how God created us, right? So rain can be beautiful, right? Especially if you're inside and maybe like able to read in a conservatory or on a window and it's raining outside. That's kind of let's say a romantic image or a very kind of calming feeling. But yeah, it's really harder for people to appreciate when it's raining, right? Because we have our own comfort levels. And I think also part of it is just because we are so disconnected in a way from God's ideal, from the way God intended the world to be, right? So we kind of, in many ways, if you look at how we built our buildings and society, and we're trying to stay inside, almost even isolate ourselves even from each other, right? Um, it is something I was thinking when I was thinking about the outdoor service and really looking forward to it. I think part of it was a feeling of kind of being inside too much or just, focused on work and family and really looking forward to kind of having a real kind of community event and feeling, right? Because I think that's also something we need, right? But what I was really thinking about was, rain is also part of God's nature, but it is uncomfortable a bit, right? It is like inconvenient or not as I mean, if we're honest, it's nicer to be out in the sun, right? We can't deny that reality. We can't, try to pretend they're equal. It's just as nice to be out in the rain as the sun. Like, no one believes that, right? So we like when it's sunny. We go out, we enjoy, right? It's a kind of special event. Um, and even when we think of going on holiday, we want to go somewhere where the weather's nice and we can maybe go swimming in the beach and things like that, right? Um, so so this kind of dynamic of, let's call it comfort and discomfort, right? It really reminded me of this. Similarly, people get, I think, confused about good and evil, right? And this was very topical because on Tuesday I gave the dual characteristic lecture to two guests. We had two Chinese sisters that came and listened. Um, and it was very interesting because at the end of the lecture, we had a conversation, and one of the sisters did bring up the point about evil, right? Because I'm talking about God and God's nature and duality, right? And I always try to emphasize that kind of suffering is evil, right? Real, genuine human suffering is evil because it shouldn't exist. It's unnatural. And many times, then the question comes up, well, isn't suffering necessary, right? If we didn't suffer, would we, like, suffering is kind of necessary. And if we didn't suffer, then, everything would be relative, right? So if there was no suffering, even if everyone was happy, whoever was the least happy would then be suffering, right? Because they'd be comparing themselves to other people. Um, so there's this very kind of real way of thinking that, well, suffering's necessary, everything's relative, right? Um, and it is kind of something I completely disagree with, right? This idea that evil is necessary or genuine human suffering is necessary. But I think that the reason people get confused is the word suffering is so easy to associate with discomfort, right? So again, being out in the rain could be suffering in one way, right? And war is suffering, right? And those two things are so far apart from each other in terms of actual suffering and human misery, but also in how natural they are or unnatural they are, right? Um, so, but because people have this idea, okay, suffering is necessary and it's just part of life, then they come to this conclusion that evil is necessary and evil is part of life, right? And I think that that's a really important distinction, and I think the principle is actually very good at explaining that. But I think we also have to be good at kind of helping people understand that the difference between genuine evil, genuine human suffering, which is way too rampant, right? And it's heartbreaking. And every person, at some level of conscience, if they come across human suffering, it's heartbreaking, right? Um, and we can see that actually in the way people react to, let's say, the war happening in Gaza, right? And regardless of anyone's position on who's right or wrong in the war in Gaza, when you see people suffering on any side, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see children dying. It's heartbreaking to see families dying, right? It's heartbreaking to see like an entire city leveled to the ground, right? Because those are people's lives. Those are um, you know the result of that is suffering, and it's starvation, and it's people without work and families being torn apart. So so that's suffering. That's real suffering, right? And that's what's evil. And then there's discomfort, right? And that's getting stuck out in the rain when you were going shopping, right? So like it's such a different thing, right? Because we want to be comfortable, right? But sometimes we have to be uncomfortable, right? If you think about anything that's worth doing, you kind of have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. That's how you grow, that's how you develop. Even just your physical body, if you want to train it, that's a very uncomfortable thing to do, right? You force yourself on a certain schedule, you're lifting weights, you're getting up early in the morning to go train, right? If you want to learn something, you have to put in the time, you have to make time to study, to practice, right? So all these things are always going to be uncomfortable, um, but they're not suffering, they're not evil, right? Um, so it it's really important actually to be uncomfortable sometimes, right? It's kind of that's the necessary part of life. That's the balance, right? That's where you can be more comfortable when you've trained yourself by being uncomfortable sometimes, right? And that's where the kind of relative comparison works, right? If you've trained yourself and you've kind of been out in uncomfortable situations, then you really appreciate when you can be comfortable, right? I think the Irish might appreciate being out on the beach more than other cultures because of their own home weather, right? So when I think this is similar to the English, right? When they go out and they can really have a wonderful day at the beach, it's really great. It's really amazing, right? Um, as long as they put on enough suntan lotion and don't let themselves get burnt to a crisp, right? So so the reason I'm kind of sharing this reflection partially is because of the lecture on the Tuesday, right? Because it always comes up, and I always have almost I don't want to say a violent reaction against it, but a very passionate reaction, right? That evil is not, we cannot accept that evil is natural, right? To me, that's one of the, it's why I like the introduction. It really tries to make that point. Whenever I give the introduction lecture, I try to make that point. But also when I'm talking about God's heart of a parent, right? And how human suffering is so heartbreaking to God as a parent, right? That we can't have this. One of the things that also I think the principle so clearly explains is that suffering is shared by everyone because God suffers when his children suffer. And if God's suffering and we really want to be understand God and connect to God, then we will suffer by finding God, right? That suffering isn't because God is evil, but because evil is affecting God's heart, right? And God's children. So it's yeah, so those are things that I think are such core parts of our faith, right, in our community. This understanding that evil is not natural. So what are we doing about it? What can we do about it? What are we going to do about it, right? And then the understanding that suffering is something we all share, that God is suffering, and so we're all suffering, right? If someone is completely happy, then they don't actually understand God's heart. If they're a 10 out of 10 on the happiness scale, they're not actually connected to God's providence. They're almost like ignorant. They're delusional, right? They don't really understand what God needs and what God's trying to do. Um, I used to explain this as like, because I'm generally a very optimistic and happy person, right? But I try to explain this as like, there's like an underground river of sadness that I'm aware of, right? And that's always kind of part of my life and that I try to balance and be conscious of and that I genuinely care about, right? So coming back to the rain, I was thinking, what is the rain saying, right? Um, is that the way I hear it is like, I'm not evil, right? So I'm sorry if you don't like me, right? It's kind of like the rain serves a very beautiful purpose. And if we really understood God's heart, we really were connected, uncomfortable things wouldn't really bother us. In fact, that we'd appreciate them. We'd be happy to be uncomfortable, right? Um, and so I was kind of really reflecting on kind of my reaction this morning, right? And I know a lot of it was because I was just looking forward to it, a bit disappointed, but also it does to me kind of highlight how far I still am away from really having that direct connection with God's heart, right? To really be able to understand the the value of everything that happens, right? Because rain is just rain. There's no motive there. There's no evil. There's no real suffering. The suffering is always in the human heart, in the human reaction, in the human shortcomings, right? Um, so yeah, so my conclusion was, we can be uncomfortable sometimes. We should be uncomfortable, right? But we really don't need evil, right? And for me, that's actually a very powerful motivating factor every day, right? Is that there really shouldn't be evil in this world. And I know, again, going back to this comfort and discomfort, I know I avoid discomfort that I should be going through so that I can be better at trying to solve the problem of evil, if that makes sense, right? That really comes down to habits and my own motivations and emotional states and shortcomings, right? But I do want to figure that out, right? How to be a better person. I know I'm going to have to give up some of my comforts, right? To be more uncomfortable more often so that I can have a bigger impact and be able to solve more real problems of evil. Um, so I have a feeling that probably in the afternoon the weather will be really nice again, just the way things work. So hopefully there's still time to go out and let God's nature speak for itself, right? I'm still thinking maybe we'll take the kids to the park or something after. But regardless, I just wanted to share this reflection today about rain versus evil, or really more the yeah, the very unholy, unnatural nature of evil, and how it's something really is something we need to figure out how to cure, how to solve, how to heal. Um, I know it's going to take a long time, but it is something that is a core part of my faith, a core part of my motivation. And the discomfort of the rain helps remind me of that, I guess, is my conclusion. Although remember, the last comment I'll make is again, I was being lazy, so I had to come up with the service very quickly because I was hoping that we were outside in the beautiful sun and that my service could have been let God's nature speak for itself. Instead, God made me prepare a service and share with you. So I hope even though it was a little shorter and a little less prepared than usual, I hope there were some points from that that you could take away. And on that note, uh, I'll close my service today with a prayer. So please join me in prayer. So, our dear, beloved, and precious Heavenly Parent, it's always hard for us to understand the full picture of your heart and your providence. In many ways, our minds are so limited, especially by our own physical reality. We can only see so far, hear so much, say a certain limited number of things. We only have a certain number of hours in the day. And so, if we're relying purely on our physical beings and physical existence, then all we could do is just try to survive and appreciate each moment. But we know that we're deeper beings than that. We understand that life is eternal, and that we have an eternal spirit that has the ability and the capacity to connect directly to the heart of our Creator, our origin, our cause, our Heavenly Parent. So, as we come here together as brothers and sisters, I really pray that we can be capable of fully understanding your heart. That is our purpose, our goal. And no matter how difficult it is, no matter how far away we may seem, I pray we can always be encouraged and never give up hope and never give up fighting to unlock that deeper heart that we have as human beings. That we're not just smart animals, but that we're truly children of a divine heavenly being. And I pray that in our everyday lives, as we face different challenges and different opportunities to grow, that can always be a cornerstone of our own confidence and our own faith and our own view of ourself and of our purpose. So we're grateful for every brother and sister here today. We pray for all those throughout this country and also throughout the world who are lost and have no purpose or have lost hope or lost faith, and pray that your heart can comfort them in whichever way people can accept it. So I'm grateful always for this chance to be alive on this earth, especially at this time and with these brothers and sisters, and pray we can really come together today and share today our hearts and come closer to each other and closer to you and the process. We invite you to always be with us every day. Now report all of this with a very grateful heart in the name of Youngil Eli Loew, a blessed central family in attendance to the Holy Mother. Okay, thank you everyone. That's my service for today.